Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a chessboard placed outside of time itself. On one side sits a young man from New Orleans in the 1850s, a player who crushed the world before organized championships even existed. On the other side sits the most dominant American chess player of the 20th century, a man who dethroned the Soviet chess empire. Two geniuses, two Americans, two players famous for their brutal attacking style and absolute confidence at the board. But the question is simple. What if Paul Morphy played Bobby Fischer? Today we're going to explore the styles of these two legends, speculate on what openings they might have chosen, and ultimately ask the impossible question. Who would actually win this thing? The phenomenon of Paul Morphy. Before official world championships even existed, there was one man everyone knew was the best player alive. That man was Paul Morphy. In the late 1850s, Paul Morphy absolutely demolished the strongest players of his time. He defeated masters across Europe, including the legendary Adolf Anderssen, who at the time was considered one of the greatest attacking players in the world. Morphy's style was lightning-fast development, opening lines, and ruthless attacks on the king. His philosophy was simple. Develop quickly, control the center, and punish slow play. And if his opponent made a single mistake, the game could be over in as many as 10 moves. Even today, many of Morphy's games look shockingly modern, but there is one huge question. Was Morphy dominant because he was that good, or because his opponents were simply not as strong as modern grandmasters? And then we talk about the genius of Bobby Fischer. More than a century later, another American who arrived to shake the chess world to its core. That man was Bobby Fischer. In 1972, Fischer defeated Boris Spassky in the legendary World Championship match. This was more than a chess match. It was a Cold War culture battle between the United States and the Soviet Union. But Fischer didn't just win, he dominated. At one point during the candidate cycle, he defeated both Mark Tumanov and Bent Larsen by an unbelievable score of 6-0. Something almost unheard of at the highest level. Fischer's style was a fascinating combination of brutal calculation, perfect opening preparation, relentless positional pressure, and when the position opened up, Fischer could attack just as violently as the romantic masters of the 19th century. The similarities between Morphy and Fischer, despite living more than 100 years apart, these two players share some incredible similarities. First, both were massively dominant over their contemporaries. Morphy crushed European masters. Fischer crushed the Soviet elite. Second, both players had phenomenal calculation ability. And third, and perhaps most importantly, both had a deep love for active attacking chess. Neither player enjoyed passive defense. They wanted the initiative. They wanted control. And above all, they wanted the head of the enemy king. So what openings might they play? Well, this is where things get very, very interesting. I shall now open an analysis board. Ladies and gentlemen, we will go to the board. We know what the first move would have been, regardless of colors. It would have been 1e4. 1e4 would have been played. But the question is, what do we play afterwards? Now, when Morphy had the white pieces, he loved an Italian game. He even loved, should we put the moves on the board, e4, e5, knight f3. Knight here, he loved an Italian. He even loved the Evans Gambit. This is what he played. He loved stuff like this. But now, Fischer also believed in 1e4. He believed it. He never saw anything useful in 1d4. Played it very, very rarely. e4, best by test. But what would Morphy play in response? Fischer also had a fascination with the Italian, but also the Spanish. And even various other types of gambits. So what could they really, really play? Well, if we think about it for a moment, 1e4 was always going to start. In Morphy's time, he played the Italian game, the Evans Gambit, even the King's Gambit, which I didn't mention. These openings aimed for rapid development and immediate attacks. If Morphy faced Fischer, there is a strong chance that we may have got e4, e5, knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4, the Italian game, and even the Evans Gambit. But what if Fischer had white? Well, he would have also played 1e4, and he preferred a Ruy Lopez. He also could have played a King's Indian attack, and he could have played the Sicilian. So there is a chance, if we go back to the analysis board for just a brief moment, as I cue it up once again, what we could have got is e4, c5. Morphy would have played knight to f3. We would have got d6, there would have been d4, takes, knight to f6, knight to c3, a6, the Najdorf Sicilian. Bobby Fischer with the black pieces, Paul Morphy with the white pieces. This position seems almost tailor-made for those two players to play together. It would have allowed Morphy to discover what he would have liked. Perhaps he would have played a freak attack with rook to g1 and then pushing for g4, g5. He may have invested in one of the bishop lines with one of the bishops. He may have moved his knights. We don't know what Morphy would have done. Perhaps he would have sacrificed his bishop and looked to get his knights into the game and so forth. It's such a cutting-edge position for the two of them to play, and I firmly believe this could have happened. But what else could they have played? What really else, if we explore they could have had? So we could have had a Ruy Lopez. If Fischer had black, you almost certainly would have gone for the Najdorf Sicilian. But what if we got a Ruy Lopez? What if we go to the analysis board once again for the last time, and we put on the moves from the Najdorf Sicilian, and we go back e4, e5, knight f3, knight to c6, and we got a Ruy Lopez. Let's say Morphy now has the black pieces. What would he have employed? He almost certainly would never have gone for the Berlin endgame. But would he have played the main line, Morphy's defense? Surely it's his defense. But if he's playing Fischer, would he have gone for something obscure, like a knight ge7? Like a Schliemann or something? Or a Cosio defense, or, pushing for f5, one of these interesting Spanish gambits. And what if he did play Morphy's defense of the Ruy Lopez with bishop e5 and a6? Would Fischer have taken immediately? Would he have gone here? And then what does Morphy play? His position matters. Does he go to the traditional Spanish with castles, a knight f6, and then, for example, a bishop to c5? The neo-archangels, and go for really active development. Would Fischer have taken? Would he have rerouted the bishop? So many questions to not even the openings these players would have got, but what positions would they have got? And who would have attacked? That is the thing. Both players cannot attack. But in the Ruy Lopez, it's possible, and it's deep calculation. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask, what would happen? The big question, who would win? This question is incredibly difficult because chess knowledge has evolved massively. Modern players benefit from 150 years of accumulated theory, computer analysis, professional training methods. If both players played with the knowledge of their own era, then Fischer almost certainly would have had won. But if Paul Morphy had access to the modern training and the theory, many historians believe he could have been one of the strongest players in history. In fact, Fischer himself once said that Morphy's game showed extraordinary natural talent. So the most fascinating scenario might be this. Morphy with modern preparation, Fischer with his legendary work ethic. In that case, we might witness one of the greatest attacking battles ever played. I certainly do not think these players would have been making draws in 10 or 20 moves. These players would have attacked each other tooth and nail and fought to the very end. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, who would have won? Paul Morphy or Bobby Fischer? Let me know in the comments down below.